and info. Thank you for reminding. Or quite often I will forget to record. Okay, so anyways, in this chapter, Form 5, Chapter 1, what we mainly learn is plant growth. You forget already. So we do a quick recap. Yeah, so I'll be doing some handwritten notes over here. You can copy if you want. Or if you want to screenshot the whole thing later, also can if you're lazy. Okay, but it's better to write down. So plant tissues, we learn there are two types, meristematic and permanent. So for meristematic tissue, right, they are basically baby tissues, I would say, young tissues actually. So they actually consist of meristematic cells. So if you remember the definition of tissue, right, tissue are made up of similar cells. So the cells they are made up of right, are all called meristematic. Means they are baby tissues, baby cells. Now all these cells, right, they're like human. When we baby that time, right, we are useless. We only know how to cry and sleep. Right? Exactly the same. All these cells, right, they have no function. What? As they start to grow, right, they will undergo a process called. Okay, why not you all tell me what's the process? You all remember or not? What's the process that this cell have to undergo to grow into permanent tissue? Anyone remember? Give you a hint. When you all grow older, right, you all will become different. You all become mature. You all will change. You all become different. Like I say, yes, Susan, very good. So the process is called differentiation. Not the ADMET differentiation, the different. So just remember, as you grow older, you become different, you become mature, you become more useful. So permanent tissues, right, they don't look the same anymore. So there are actually three kinds of permanent tissue, which are right here. Number one, epidermis or epidermal tissue. You have ground tissue, and you also have vascular. In chapter 1, right, more often they like to ask about ground, which is involved mainly in support 1. So I usually remember like this, pergi, college, sama-sama, which is the parent schema, colon schema, and also scleran schema. Now, this one I won't explain here. Later we do questions, I will mention more about it, don't worry. Now, of course, vascular also important. Vascular is xylem phloem. Just that in this chapter, they won't really ask vascular much because vascular is more like a chapter 4 thing. So unless it's a chapter 4 question, then yeah, they'll ask more detail about vascular. If not, usually you just ask about ground. Okay, let's focus more on meristematic because we are talking about growth. If you're permanent, you cannot grow anymore. So mainly this one will have more process to talk about. So meristematic tissues, they are also they are divided into two types called apical meristem. Okay, the M stands for meristem. I just write M, and lateral meristem. Now, the meaning of apical means the tip. So they are literally your shoots tip and your root tip, means the topmost part of the plant and the bottommost part of the plant. If you don't know what I'm drawing, there's the plant, here's the shoot tip, here's the root tip lah. Okay, now apical meristem, right, since they are the tip of the plant, right? Okay, basically meristematic tissues, right? Their cells are actively dividing cells. They will keep on mitosis so they can grow. Remember, if you're a baby, you need to grow. So for apical meristem, right? When they mitosis, right, the tip will basically grow taller and longer. So apical meristem, right, mainly increases the length of plant. And this is what we call as primary growth. Okay, lateral meristem. Now, where do we find lateral? If you don't know what lateral, lateral means side, but not exactly the side lah. Meaning when you cut the stem cross-sectionally and you look from the top, let's say you have a stem here, you cut at the top, you look from the top, right? Okay, so this is the cross-section of the stem. Lateral meristem is basically two rings. Okay, the first one is between your xylem and your phloem, called the vascular cambium. I need to recall a bit sometimes. And you have another ring on the outside called the cork cambium. When this, again, they are meristem, meaning they will mitosis to grow. When these two rings mitosis, right, they will become wider. So lateral meristem is to increase the diameter of plant, which this is what we call as secondary growth. So primary growth means you have to grow tall. So plant, the main thing they have to do is grow tall, because if you don't grow tall, they can't get sunlight. If their roots don't grow long, they can't get water. So they want to grow tall first. But as they grow taller and taller, they become unstable. Then after that, they will undergo secondary growth to be more stable, to achieve what we call as mechanical support lah. Okay, secondary growth I won't explain here because the process is quite long. Later when we do questions, I will one shot explain to you. Okay, for primary growth, right, I'll revise here a bit. Now, this is very basic, very simple one. Now, in your primary growth, right, what you need to know is basically the growth zones at your shoot tip and your root tip. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this very simple one. So at your shoot tip and root tip, right, there are 3 growth zones. Okay, I will put this further apart a bit. Now, at the tip, right, is called zone of cell division. Okay, I just write C dot division, means zone of cell division. So for root, it will start from the bottom. Yeah, root will start from the bottom, shoot of course start from the top. So basically this zone, right, the cells will keep on mitosis, so they can grow. Now as they grow longer already, right, the cells then have to start to become bigger. So the next zone is what we call a zone of cell elongation. Right, zone of cell elongation. And then the final zone, as they become big already, right, now these cells have to start to become useful. Means they will then start to undergo differentiation to form all these permanent tissue. So meristematic identify these 2 zones. At the 3rd zone, they want to start to become useful towards the plant. So then they will have the 3rd and final zone is called zone of cell differentiation. Okay, so we have a bit more space here. Wait. All right, then so you need to know what happens at each zone. Okay, here also I briefly mentioned that. So the most straightforward thing question for us is explain the process that occur at, let's say, zone of cell division. Okay, so for zone of cell division, now what happened? Of course, mitosis law. So meaning you know the cells divide actively by mitosis. Okay, so the active I just write the keyword lah, active mitosis. Now, why they want to keep on mitosis? Because you need more cells to grow. So basically, it's to increase number of cells for growth. So depending if the question is asking shoot or root, then you answer differently lah. If the question is showing shoot, then you say growth of shoot law. If they show you root, then you say growth of root. So this is the simple thing you need to know. Mitosis, more cells grow. That's it. That's basically primary growth. And on top of that, very often, right, they also like to ask the cells punya characteristics. So state the characteristics of the cells found here. Because these cells, right, they are baby cells. So they are quite unique a bit. Okay, so the cells here, that they have 4 characteristics. Number 1, they have large nuclei. Their nucleus big. Why nucleus big is because nucleus is the main part that controls mitosis. So they are big to control mitosis. The nucleus basically is very active. So it's large. Okay, then the most important one, the common we usually say is this one, small vacuole. As we know, vacuole stores water to increase the size, right, to provide turgidity. So since they haven't elongated yet, the vacuole haven't really absorbed water, so it's still small. Understand? And then cytoplasm is what I don't want to explain. Okay, we remember easier one, thin cell wall. So since they are baby cells, cell wall very thin, no? So these are the three main characteristics you can remember, no? Then at the zone of cell elongation, apa yang terjadi di sini? Basically, they elongate. Elongate means long. Just remember long means they become big lah, basically. But how? So just now I just mentioned only they mainly rely on their vacuole. So at this zone, right, the cells start to absorb water. So basically, water will diffuse into vacuoles by osmosis. And then the small vacuole, so here you see is S, means at zone of cell division, the cells have many vacuoles, but they're all very small. Now these vacuoles will start to merge. So basically, small vacuoles, they will merge to form large vacuole. Okay, so merge. And anyone remember what's this process or not? Come, your turn. When the vacuole enlarge, there's a term to describe this, which question like to ask also what? The process of vacuole growing big, enlarging is called? Yes, Susie, very good. It's called vacuolation. Excuse me. So you must remember through vacuolation. So the purpose, the importance of this zone, if they ever ask, right, is basically to increase the size of cells. So just now was to increase the number, now you increase the size because you are growing. Now, and then for zone of cell differentiation, okay, this one very simple. As you start to grow big, you have to become useful, like you all right now, right? Next year you're 18, you're adult, you have to start to become useful. You go to study specific things that you want to do for the rest of your life already. So same here. Here they start to differentiate. So basically now the tissues will form different kind of tissues. Just like next time you all, some become doctor, some become lawyer, some become accountant, some become engineer. Same lah. So the cells start to become different kind of specific tissues. So very simple, this one you just have to say the cells will then differentiate to form specific cells with specific function. Okay. So this is basically primary growth. And at the same time also, I briefly mentioned the type of tissues last. So if you want to screenshot this, can, but very hard to fit in one page. I just minimize this thing a bit. Put this here. You can go ahead. Okay. If you're copying still, then copy finish. Then for the rest of today, we may need to do more questions lah. Okay. So if you have the notes already, you can look at this page. If you don't have, I already posted a soft copy in the chat. Later you can have a look. Now, if you look at this question, page number 16. Page number 16. Okay, this one I won't do already lah, because just now we already wrote down the things, right? It's all here already. So this is very straightforward, very simple, don't need to think one. So they ask you to label the zones, obviously we know already. Division, elongation, differentiation. And then they ask you briefly explain the process at zone Q. So you just have to say the water diffuses vacuole, vacuole small become big, then this is called vacuolation. That's the process, 3 months. So now R division I also wrote for you already. Divide actively by mitosis, increase its size, increase number of cells. This is for mainly growth. However, just now I left out one thing. at the tip of the root right now, you must see carefully sometimes. A lot of you will make this mistake. Now, if they ask like that, yeah, obviously it's zone of cell division. But if they point specifically at this part, I see got one like condom covering the tip at that one. So this thing, it's not called zone of cell elongation, of course. This is like the helmet, the protection of the root. It's called the root cap. Yes, Susie, exactly. Root cap. So what does root cap do? I already say protect. So basically, it protects the root tip. You can say from damage while penetrating into the soil. Because sometimes the soil will have hard stones. Sometimes the soil will be dry, it will be very hard, very compact. And when you penetrate it, then sometimes the root tip will be damaged. Yeah. So this thing is there to obviously protect it. All right. Now, so this one I don't do already. We already mentioned already, right? This one. So very straightforward one. Now we do something a bit different. You can, if you have the notes, you can look at page 21. If not, just write down together with me lah. Right. So here, the answer is label the zone. Sorry, actually here it got a bit mistake because this is supposed to be zone B, C, D. A is not considered a zone. Now you can see here, these are division. This one is zone of cell elongation. This cell division. This one is differentiation, like we just mentioned earlier. Now, at zone of cell differentiation, you can see you start to have tissue start to form. See, you start to have root hair, you start to have xylem and phloem form because these are the permanent tissues. Okay, and then this is not a zone. This is basically where you have permanent tissues already. So this A is actually not a zone lah. It's actually permanent tissues lah. This is not a zone. So zone is actually just BCD. Now, then let's get B1. Identify which zone comprises of actively dividing cells through mitosis. So divide what else, right? Obviously, it's zone of cell division. Zone D, you can certainly say that. Then two differences between zone C and zone D. Now, they quite ask you to compare the zones, especially, of course, these two zones. Okay, because these two zones, they basically have the same kind of cells, meristematic baby cells, but obviously we know they do different things. So the first thing you can compare is the process that the cells undergo. Here, one is mitosis, one is elongating, enlarging. Okay, Susan, that one also can. Okay, but let's just start with something simpler first. Everyone also sure can find out the process. Okay, so this one I'll just type the answer here. So number one, you can say cells at zone C divides by mitosis, while cells at zone C elongates through enlarging the vacuole. So enlarged vacuole punya process called vacuolation. Then the second difference, okay, just now, Susan, you already mentioned, yes, very good. Anyone else know what's the difference between these two zones? What else can we compare? Now, don't compare the size. Don't say one big, one small. Now, the very common thing you can compare, right? Just now also in memory, actually, we got mentioned one is what? So you got to remember how the cells get elongate vacuolation, meaning your vacuole here is bigger compared to here. Remember we say have small vacuoles. That's the second thing you can compare. So number two, cells at zone C has smaller, or you just say small vacuums, while cells at zone it is D, right? This one, not Z. Sorry, mistake. D, right? A D. Oh yeah, here is D. Sorry, this one is D. This one is C. Made mistake already. Has larger vacuums. Right. Then the next question actually we will don't do lah. Actually, this one is a bit ridiculous question, so yeah, I won't do this one. Okay, so these are the basic things you need to know. Compare also very important one lah. One large vacuum, one small vacuum, very simple. Then okay, let's also do this one. This one also a quite interesting question. Actually, last time when I teach your chapter one, so we go do this before already one lah. But never mind, let's just try again. So again, primary growth, very standard one lah. They show three zones. So besides labeling the three zones now, look at question 8. They ask, name the type of meristematic tissues found. So this is at page 14, question 4. So there are two types of meristematic. Just now we already said, right? You have the tip one, apical, and also the round, the side one, lateral, right? So obviously this tip is apical lah. Yeah, this one don't need to explain lah. Then straight away. What is the type of growth? So there's only two growth within this chapter, primary, secondary. So we are focusing on the tip, increasing the length. Obviously, primary growth. Define the type of growth mentioned. So that's it, explain primary growth. Primary growth is basically for the plant to grow tall. Remember I said it increase the length. So you can say it's a growth whereby plants increases its length. So if it's secondary, then diameter lah. The role of cells in zone P. So what is P? P is cell division, right? So what's the role there? So basically, mitosis. Why they want mitosis? Okay, they want the role. Why they have the mitosis? Because the reason is to increase the number of cells. Yes, exactly. That's the rule. So you don't go and say, oh, mitosis. Mitosis is their process. Why they want to mitosis? Because they want to have more cells to grow. So you can mention both of these together. It's to increase number of cells for growth. So this is should, right? So you say for growth of should lah. Yeah, this question very simple. Next, vacuolation is a process that occurs in zone Q. What is meant by vacuolation? So vacuolation means vacuum become big law. So it's a process whereby small vacuums merges to form larger vacuums. Large vacuums. Merge or fuse. Yes, also you can say fuse. All right. Then next, also a very typical one. This whole question we're doing is a very typical kind of question you ask, nothing too special. Can I this one? Draw the difference of vacuum shown in P and Q. Mistake here. So this is actually P, this is actually Q. So P is zone of cell division. Now when you draw me the vacuum, so you just have to mainly show the vacuum. So vacuums, they come in numbers. So there are many small ones you can draw or something like that. And then the nucleus, just add it in. Their zone Q, as they elongate already, all these vacuum will merge to form a large vacuum. So you can just draw like that. Vacuum is the key thing you have to show lah, of course. Okay. And then, what is the importance of vacuolation? The importance of vacuolation during growth. So, cell division is to increase number of cells for growth, right? Vacuolation is to increase the size of cells. So this is the exact same question as this, just that this is asking for cell division. Zone of cell division is elongation, or why they need to divide more cells, or why they want to elongate, increase the size, or. Then last one here, state the shape and structure of the cells in zone R. Now, in zone R is your differentiation. So like we mentioned, there are many, many different tissues that will be formed here. So every cells and tissues here, right, they will have their own specific shape and size, of course. So basically, you have to say here, every cells have its specific shape or different shape to basically carry out specific function. So right now, xylem have xylem punya shape to do their function. Phloem also the same. All the ground tissue that we mentioned earlier also the same. So just like when you grow older, right, everybody will be different because you want to do different things. The athlete, for example, their body very buff because they need to exercise. People who work office, their body not so fit, for example. Same thing lah, something like that. Okay. Now, primary growth, done already. So our shoot tip, root tip, and meristem tissues are done explaining already. Actually, nothing much, very simple only. That's it. You just need mainly know the 3 growth zones. So everyone can follow, right? So if you can, now next, let's look at secondary growth. For secondary growth, I straight away use this question to explain lah. You can look at page 23, question 10. Now, for secondary growth, as we mentioned earlier already, mainly you got to focus on the lateral meristem, which is these 2 rings at the cross-section of the stem. So like I said just now, these 2 rings, right, they also will mitosis to grow, but they will grow outwards to increase the diameter. So how they do that? Okay, let's just focus on this stem over here. So when a stem undergoes primary growth, means after the 3 growth zones already, right, they will look like this. Very simple, the structure. Slowly, they will grow into like that to become thicker by that secondary growth law. Okay, so let's just label the structures here. Okay, label, you should already label here lah. Huh? Okay, so after zone of cell differentiation, right, the tissues you form are very basic. So for example, we know that this is xylem, this is phloem. But in this case, you're going to label it as primary. Let's label together, xylem and primary phloem. Xylem always inside, phloem also always on the outside. Okay, then focus on those 2 rings. So the first ring is between the xylem and the phloem. This is called the vascular cambium. So secondary growth starts when the vascular cambium mitosis to form a ring. So actually at the second picture, right, you're supposed to form a ring like this. So it's a bit mistake here. So this ring is called the cambium ring. Now this ring will then mitosis inwards and outwards. So you become thicker. Okay, so this is how it works, you see. Basically, it will mitosis inwards and outwards. So you form 2 new tissues, one on the inside, one on the outside. So your primary xylem and phloem will be pushed further away. So come to this diagram, you will have new xylem inside here, which is called the secondary xylem, and a new phloem over here called the secondary phloem. So basically, S is pointing at secondary xylem. So on the outside one is your secondary phloem. And then if you're still confused, right? Okay, just remember, see, I'll draw here for you already. When the cambium rings start to undergo secondary growth, right, you will form two new tissues, one on the inside, one on the outside. Okay, so your primary, right, will always be further away. So if they ask you to label, right, you can see this is basically your primary xylem. They push further away already. So primary phloem they didn't show here, but it'll be also further away from the center because you push it out. So the one that is closer to the center will always be the secondary. Okay, so for the first ring, we're done already. Okay, so let me just summarize for you down here. Our vascular cambium will first mitosis, form a ring or cambium ring, and then they will mitosis inwards and outwards to form secondary xylem and secondary phloem. So how to explain this, right? You just say vascular cambium mitosis to form a cambium ring. Cambium ring continues to divide by mitosis to form secondary xylem and phloem. Now, on top of that, secondary xylem, will mainly form something called lignin, which is wood. So after secondary growth, wood will be formed because of secondary xylem. So basically, you can say secondary xylem forms wood tissues, which is made of lignin. That's why if you remember this chapter, we did learn, right? Plant that have wood are plant that undergo secondary growth. Plant that don't have wood, right, are usually plants that don't undergo secondary growth. Only through secondary growth, you can form wood. Okay, so for example, grass, paddy, banana plant, all these, they don't undergo secondary growth because they don't have wood. Okay, now then the second ring, which is outside one, this one, R, the one that pointing R. So this one is called C-O-R-K, spell properly, cork cambium. Now what does this thing do? Same. It's going to mitosis inwards and outwards to form one inner new tissue and one outer new tissue. So what is this outer and inner tissue that they form? Okay. So when you mitosis inwards, right, there will be new tissue over here inside, which they didn't label, so I'll label for you here. This is called the secondary cortex. Cortex means like the flesh of the stem. So initially here is the cortex. So I form a new layer of cortex. And the outer layer that they form, which I think they're asking you to label here, U, okay, this is called the cork. Cork eventually becomes what we call as the bark. Bark, Chinese say the 树皮, means it's like the surface of the stem. You know, when you touch like woody stem, right, it's usually very hard and very rough. That's the bark. Bark forms from the cork. So cork eventually will dry up and become harder to form the bark, which is the outer surface of the woody stem, usually very hard, very rough. Okay, and to summarize this, very simple, similar also. So cork cambium is already a ring, so you don't need to form like a ring like previously like that. So straight away, you can say it undergoes mitosis to form the inner, when you explain that, you must say inner secondary cortex. Label that time don't need to write inner, but when you explain that time, right, if they ask you to explain the secondary growth, you need to say, form inner secondary cortex and the outer cork. Cork eventually develops into bark. And bark, right, actually have a few function importance. Do you remember what does bark do? Anyone? So what is the purpose of the bark? So what's the benefit lah, the advantage of bark? So if woody stem, they have this bark, this hard, rough surface. What is it for? Okay, number one, you can say, yes, it is waterproof. So you can reduce water loss. Number two, this surface is very hard. Again, Suzanne, yes, very good. So this hard surface will prevent insects from biting the stem. It needs to prevent insects from absorbing like nutrients and water from it lah. So you can say it protects itself against attack from insects. Pathogens, yeah, you can say that also. But these are the two main functions. Also, if the weather get too hot, yeah, there's this thing to protect them. If there's a lot of insects, the bark also can protect them. Can write mechanical injury? Yes, you can say that also. Protect yourself. Provide protection against mechanical injury. Yeah, by insects. Yeah, you are the main one that will bite them lah. Also can say that mechanical injury. So basically, I summarize secondary growth. A lot of you, when you first see read about secondary growth, you think well, very complicated, right? The stem was also complicated, but just divide it into these two rings. What they do are the same. They mitosis in and out. Mitosis in and out. Done. Easy, right? Okay. Then moving on to question B. Explain the role of R in woodies. Then what does cork cambium do? I already summarized here for you already. So you just have to explain basically what does cork cambium do? Mitosis law. So number one, cork cambium divides by mitosis to form those two dimensional inner secondary cortex and outer cork, which forms the bark. This is exactly what you can use to answer this question. Okay. Again, another one. What is the significance of primary growth and secondary growth in plants? Oh, yes, we haven't mentioned this today, right? So primary growth, we already know, is to increase the length. But when a plant increases in length, it can go in two directions. It can go up, that's for the shoot. It can go down, which that's for the root, right? So you can write both. So I write both here. So you can say number one is to achieve what we call as maximum height. Why you want to grow taller? Obviously, what's up there? Sunlight law, photosynthesis law. To absorb maximum sunlight for photosynthesis. How about to carry out photosynthesis? Yeah, I just mentioned that. Yeah, so if you grow taller, then I explain. This is the explanation. So after you grow taller, carry out absorb sunlight for photosynthesis. Oh. Exactly, correct. You are right. Then another thing you can say is the roots. So other than height, roots you can say is to increase length of roots. Obviously, roots is to go down, absorb water, absorb mineral salts, right? Easy lah. Absorb water and mineral salts. You also can say to provide mechanical support because as the roots go down, right, you have more surface area. The roots can grab onto the soil, yeah, and provide support also basically. Okay, this is actually primary growth. But for secondary growth, diameter law. So it's to increase diameter of plant. Diameter basically provides mechanical strength, mechanical support lah. If you want to talk about the bark, also can. Secondary growth forms the bark. What is bark for? We already mentioned just now. You also can say this. It's also an importance of secondary growth. Yeah, so what I write here are the main one, though. Why you want to grow tall, why you want to grow thick. Continue again. 24. Can I this one? Everyone. Primary growth and secondary growth. Punya difference. Okay, they ask you write similarity and difference. I don't need to read question illustrated to here. So both are growth. Now, can you tell me or not, everyone? This is very easy. What does growth require? What does growth, what involve in growth? So no matter what, however you grow, right? No matter if you're a plant, animal, when you grow, involve what? Must involve what? Come on, you're sure no one. Grow must involve what? Must involve. All right, Wei Xiang, very good. Mitosis. Exactly. Cell division. Okay, the second difference, I'll tell you later. Because because after we mention the difference only, then this one will make more sense. If I explain now, maybe some of you still don't know yet. Okay, so then we go difference first. Now, first, the purpose. So really say length, diameter. This one very simple. So we write four difference lah. Don't just stick to one. Four difference more of it we learn more today. So yeah, number one is to increase the length. Increases length of plant. This one is to increase diameter. The plant. Next, what tissue is involved? So that's here, this now I already tell you already, law. Apical meristem and lateral meristem. One is the tip, one is the lateral, the cross section. So however, when you write data, right, you must write like this: involve mitosis of apical meristem, involves mitosis of lateral meristem. All right. The third one, here, two more. Now, the next one you can relate to human. Now in human, growing tall is limited one. Right? After you reach a certain age, a certain height, you can't grow taller anymore. Right? So same, primary growth is limited. So you all form 5 already, you're more or less maximum height already. But growing sideways, got no limit, right? You eat more, you grow wider, right? So this one growth is not limited. Where we are, because you keep lagging. We are page 24 of the seminar notes. We are doing primary, secondary growth. If you really you can watch back the recording after that. Recording I'll post in our Google Classroom. I'll also post on my YouTube channel. Which question? Question number 10. Number 10. Okay, the last one you can say is the type of plants that undergo primary growth. No matter what plant you are, tall, small, wide, thin, whatever lah, you have to undergo primary growth. Occurs in all plants. However, just now we said secondary growth only woody plants can undergo. But don't say only woody plants. Now, later we're going to learn, right? Woody plants, yes, exactly, are perennial plant. Remember, in this chapter, we also got learn the different type of plant based on its life cycle. Got annual, biennial, perennial. Yeah, that will be our next part, next session, next topic. So occurs in perennial plant only. Now, so basically, only perennial plant is the one that can undergo both growth. So back to here, right? The second similarity we can say are both occur in perennial plants. And say herbaceous plant cannot. Herbaceous plants do not undergo secondary growth because by undergoing secondary growth, you form wood. So you become a woody plant. Herbaceous is the opposite of wood, ma. So herbaceous plant can won't secondary growth one. Okay. So only perennial plants will have wood because only perennial plants can secondary growth. So primary growth, every plant, herbaceous, perennial, herbaceous plant, woody plant, all will have primary growth. Understand? Hmm. Next. Now, here they give you two species of plant that undergo secondary growth, what Chengal, Merawan, or Meranti. All these are very common, like last time geography or those kind of big woody trees in rainforests. So they say that these two plants, they undergo secondary growth. Of course, they are woody plants, they definitely undergo secondary growth. So they ask you to give one characteristics of plant that undergo secondary growth. So plant that undergo secondary growth will form wood, so they have hard woody stem. So that's basically Chengal and Meranti. Usually we use them to make timber. So they have hard and strong wood. What are the commercial uses of this plant? Now, in our textbook, in the notes in front also got mentioned, it's part of our syllabus. Plant will undergo secondary growth, right? Got commercial use, means got economical use, means you can use it to earn money to help boost your country's economy. So plant that undergo secondary growth, right? Number one, like we mentioned, wood. Wood can be used to make many things, right? So this is how you explain. You can say it's used to produce timber wood, kayu balat, 木材, three languages also I mentioned already. Timber timber wood. So what we use timber for, what we use wood for lah, basically make, of course, furniture, papers, buildings, some buildings that made of wood, right? So then you explain which are used to make furniture, paper, which can. What else? Building frames. Some building uses wood, like roofs also. Building frames, fences. Yes, of course. You also can say that. Yeah. One or two example is enough actually. And the second one is some woody, not all lah. Inside their stem got like liquid one, got zap inside one. So that one is called the, yes, resin and oil. So resin usually used to make those kind of varnish, to make those kind of your wooden floor more shiny, used to make used for art and craft one. Oil are essential oils that usually used to make perfumes, used to make those kind of air refreshener at home. Some of those kind of essential oil, like called what, sandalwood. You pour inside your air diffuser, then your room got this smell, nice smell, right? Yeah. So basically, you can say which use to make perfume. Mm. like this. So I'll show you how to explain. All right, moving on. Next page only. Page question 11. Now, secondary growth, just now we mainly focus in stem. Most of the time they ask stem, and the type of stem we are looking here are dicotyledon. Eudicot means dicotyledon. Mainly means woody plants lah. Okay, because only woody plants can secondary growth ma. And this is the root. Now, secondary growth in root seldom they ask, but in case they do, you also need to know what happens here. Now, for root, right, there's only one ring. The vascular cambium, cord cambium don't have one. Okay, so basically here, just remember, even though it looks completely different, right, just remember, just like the stem, xylem always on the inside, phloem always on the outside. So basically, inside this blue color part, inside here, this is the xylem, the primary xylem. X is on the outside, so this is the primary phloem. Between xylem and phloem, you have one layer of tissue that separates it, same as the stem, which they're pointing at Z. So this is your vascular cambium. Okay, then if the secondary growth really, how they will look like? Sometimes, okay, for this one, usually I'll see them asking you to draw. Okay, now very difficult one. Come on, get your pencils. Let's do this together. Whether you got notes or not, let's draw together. Okay, so first, of course, you draw one rounding. That's the root. Yeah, grab your pencils. You want to get your what? Compass set also can, if you cannot draw circle. Now then you start by drawing the cross shape in the center. Now, this is the primary xylem. So just now we say that this is the cambium. So same like just now, the cambium will mitosis inwards and outwards. When in mitosis inwards, right, this whole thing will become like this. So it becomes something like that. So it go out already. So now you have a new layer of tissue here. So that is the secondary xylem. This is the primary xylem. So same, you can see primary will always be further away from the ring, further away from the cambium. Primary xylem. Here, secondary xylem. And lepas tu this one, in between the secondary xylem, here, this is basically your vascular cambium. Can you imagine or not? See again, by right, it was here one the cambium. So now the cambium become this already. So now you got a new layer of tissue underneath the vascular cambium. Now, where is the phloem? So since this thing, see, this cambium grow outwards already, right? So this primary phloem will be pushed far away. So your primary phloem now is this four. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is your primary phloem. Your secondary phloem is this whole thing. So again, here's your vascular cambium, secondary phloem, primary phloem. You can see primary always further away from the ring, secondary always closer. Okay. And if they ever ask, the process of secondary growth in root is the same. You just have to say vascular cambium divides by mitosis to form secondary xylem, primary xylem. But for the root don't have cambium like we mentioned just now. Understand? Now, then explain the function of structure X and Y. X and Y is just xylem and phloem. They do the same thing as you always learn, transport water, transport organic substance. This one I think can, right? So just repeat right here. Xylem X is phloem, right? So this one transports organic substance, which is the food, the sugar. Y transport water and minerals. Structure Z separates structure X and Y during secondary growth. Structure Z. Explain the process that takes place in structure Z, which enables the root to increase in size during secondary growth. Exactly like I told you just now. So during secondary growth, what does this thing do? Same. Mitosis, form secondary xylem and phloem. That's exactly what we need to say, just like what we did earlier just now. Okay, so this one shouldn't be a problem. Oh, okay, but they want 4 marks, so could I explain more detail? So number one, mitosis is 1 mark already. So you can say structure Z, which is your vascular cambium, divides by mitosis. Mitosis inverts to form, yes, Iskandar, exactly. So, which divides inwards to form secondary xylem and divides outwards to form secondary phloem. Yes, you are right. Exactly. And finally, you need to explain. So, yeah, how does this increase the size? So by doing so, the diameter increase, or that's how the size increased. So you can say hence increasing the diameter of root. It's the same thing basically I extend. See, so fast we are halfway through already, guys. We just have 1 more hour. Okay, after this, we do 1 more, then we take a quick break. Toilet break. Now, basically, predict what will happen to the plant if structure Z is not formed. So basically, what you write here is the opposite of this. So if no Z, no mitosis, it does not divide by mitosis, so it doesn't form secondary xylem, doesn't form secondary phloem, therefore the diameter does not increase. No growth, no secondary growth. Or you can say no secondary growth also. Okay, just write the opposite. Now, the one final thing that I'm going to touch on is page 30. Are we ready? 10? Yeah. Now, what is this? This is the annual growth rate. If you can follow my social media, Instagram or Xiaohongshu, right? This one just only yesterday got posted one video about it. So this one very simple. How do we determine the age of the plant? So they already mentioned here my annual growth rate. If you don't know what is that already, forget what it is. It's basically the rings on the cross section of the stem. Now, first you got to remember. From young, probably you heard before, right? You can count the rings of the stem to determine the age. However, not every plant have these rings. Number one, only plant that undergoes secondary growth have these rings. Because these rings are basically secondary xylem. Then number two, not all secondary growth plant will have this. This plant have to be situated in a seasonal region, means you got 4 seasons. Must be a seasonal region. Got spring, summer, autumn, winter. Then only you will have this. Because different color of rings are formed during different seasons. In Malaysia, our weather, our climate is the same from the beginning to the end of the year, very similar. just maybe sometimes more rain, sometimes less rain. So it'll be more or less the same. That's why it's very hard to determine the age of the tree in Malaysia. So basically, there are two lines. There will be one thicker and brighter color one, and one thinner and darker color one. Okay, so every thick and thin xylem tissues represents 1 year. So 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, for example. Okay, but first let's answer this question first. How to determine the age of the plant? You can say that is by counting, as the question already say, the annual growth rings. But let me tell you how do we count them. So like I said just now already, whereby every big and small represents 1 growth year. Whereby every big and small, you can say xylem vessel or xylem tissue, or you can say every big and small ring represents 1 growth year. And obviously, it will ask you lah, how are they formed? Now, the 4 seasons that you have to focus on is just the first 2 seasons at the beginning of the year. Okay, maybe earlier that time when I teach you this time, I might say a slightly different thing. Okay, but then after I reconfirm, I look at the textbook carefully already, right? I do some research. Okay, this is exactly what happens. Now, the first season of the year, we will say during spring. So spring, usually we like to go to northern countries like China, Japan, or maybe some places in Europe, where you see those flowers bloom, right? The sakura flower in Japan, for example. Because during spring, it's transition from winter to spring, whereby the weather starts to become warmer, there starts to be more sunlight, the conditions become more suitable. So there'll be more growth. That's why the ring formed during this time will be bigger. But what we say here is, you can say, there is enough supply of mainly 2 things, light and water. Not too much, not too little, just nice. So the main thing you're going to say is growth, secondary growth, because these are secondary xylem, which is formed during only through secondary growth. So we will say more secondary growth occurs. Understand, right? Then we describe the ring or the xylem. So therefore you say xylem tissue form. 2 things you're going to mention, the color, the size, are bigger and brighter. So that is the first ring. I give you maximum points over here in case they ask SC, like you can mention three marks. But if you structure 1 or 2 is enough already, but never mind. Okay. Then next, the smaller one. So opposite. Now some of you will say, oh, winter, but it's not winter, it's summer. Now it sounds very weird, but let me explain. Now why summer? Okay, because during summer, right, the summer in overseas and Malaysia, of course, different. Summer in overseas, it's not just hot, but it'll be very dry as well. There's not very much rain in other countries, because we are tropical region, we have more rain. We mentioned this during midweek, right? So opposite now already, you can say it is hot and dry. So there will be lesser secondary growth. There will be growth, but it'll be lesser because there's not much water. So therefore, since there's not much secondary growth, it'll be thinner. But not just thinner, the color will be darker due to lesser water. Understand? So opposite already, the xylem vessels or tissues formed are smaller and darker. Then next year, repeat again. Then you have another thick and thin, then one more year. Yeah, I know what you might be asking. Then what about autumn and winter? So you all know, towards the end of autumn, the leaves shed. During winter, there's no leaves at all. So basically, autumn and winter, there's close to zero growth. That's why there'll be no rings formed. Understand? Remember, we call this as the plant becomes dormant. The plant like sort of go to sleep. Yes. So that's why we only mention these two seasons. One with a lot of growth, one with little growth. Winter, no growth, that's why there's no rings. Can? Understand, right? So mention the season, the condition, then talk about secondary growth, more secondary growth. Then obviously the most important one, the rings, big, right? Summer, hot, dry, less growth, small, dark. Then if this essay, they might want you to say, or every big and small xylem tissue represents one growth year. Can okay, right, everyone? If you've got problem, you can ask, but I think I explained very clearly already, right? So then the last one, explain the importance of plants that have annual growth rings economically. So plants that have annual growth rings, so let's say if you cut down the trees in Malaysia to produce furniture, compared if you cut the trees in overseas. Now the wood that you cut in overseas, right, will be more valuable because of the annual growth rings. Which means your wood, your wood, right, got pattern. You know, sometimes you see those expensive furniture, right, got those lines are thick and thin lines. Those are annual growth ring, will improve the appearance, we would say, of the wood. So the importance is, you can say, look, it improves the appearance of the wood. Or other than appearance, you write more canggih punya word, you can say it increases what we call as its aesthetic properties, meaning dia lebih cantik lah, same meaning lah. You write this also if you want. More textured wood. Don't need to do pattern now answer. Actually, you just write like that. Good enough. Because I'm scared you write more texture with this kind of word, right? Then later teacher don't accept. So stick to this. Okay. Yeah. Then we'll go for 5 minutes break. 3 to 5 lah. Okay. If you finish pee earlier, we can come back and start earlier. So because I'm gonna go for toilet break also. So when we come back, we will then go to the next topic, the life cycle, the annual, biennial, perennial one. They're actually very simple one. Very fast, we can finish already one. Okay. Yeah. So for this one, right, I'll be using an additional notes, which I will put inside the chat here while we break. Then later we'll use that one. Okay. See you in a few minutes. All right, guys, we'll come back. Okay, come on. Let's go. Fast, finish this and then we're done. Now, so for the next thing, growth curves in plants. So types of plant based on their life cycle. So this one is okay lah. You can just listen here. Then after we do questions, I'll just briefly go through a bit lah. I can just listen lah. Okay. Now, growth curve in there are 3 types of plants are annual plants, biennial, perennial. So very simple. Basically, there are plants with different lifespan. Annual means they live for 1 year, then they die. Biennial, 2 years. Perennial means 3 years. Not 3 years, more than 2 years. Please don't say 3 years. Okay, they live for more than 2 years, means depending lah, some 5 years, some even 10 years. All right. So just now we say already, only perennial plants can undergo secondary growth to form wood, because these 2 plants, right, their lifespan too short already. So they don't even get to undergo secondary growth because they die too fast. After primary growth, not long, then they die already. Okay, so let's start with annual plants first. Now, annual plants, I find that they quite like to ask this more than the other two. Okay. So like last year, there are two trial papers that ask this. Later, I'll show you that trial question specifically. So for annual plants, okay, all these three plants, right, they basically have the same kind of curve called the sigmoid curve. So this S shape is called the sigmoid curve. So you have one sigmoid for annual, two sigmoid for biennial, and we call this as a series of sigmoid for perennial. So every sigmoid means represent 1 year lah. So for annual plants, right, first, of course, you know the example. So here you written who are annual plants. Basically, they are your crops, corn and paddy. They're very thin plants. Green peas, you even can say watermelon. So these plants, they're not very big. And let's say for paddy, for example, right, rice, right, we actually harvest it once a year. Right, like those Iban people, they celebrate the harvest festival, right, once a year because paddy, they grow 1 year one. Now, and in this growth curve, right, they always like to ask the first and last one the most. Because what happens at the first and last growth stage, right, it's more important, more unique, lah, I would say. Now, so for example, let's say if they ask you, explain what happens here, explain the growth stage, the growth that occurs here. Now, first, you start by saying the mass. You can see initially what happened to the mass. The mass decrease. So that's already a very special thing, because why the mass decrease when you first start to born, right? So weird, right? Okay, never mind, you just write first. So you can start by saying, yeah, the dry mass decrease. And guys, you guys remember or not why the mass decrease in the very beginning? What happens? Because the mass decrease, guys. What happens here? Because of what? Why they decrease? Okay, I give you a hint. Because of their germinating. Besides, they discard the seed coat. Another more important one is they use the food inside the seeds to grow. So recently we learned about seeds, right? Their food storage inside. So they use the food to grow. So last time when you were young, that time you always got do the what green bean punya experiment, your plant that time, right? The seed, right, will start to shrink and then leaves start to grow out. And because they absorb the nutrients in there. So what we can say is that food storage in cotyledon of seeds is used for germination. And yes, Susan, you can say that also. Seed cud is discarded, so they throw away the seed coat later, the skin of the seed. You also can say that. That's why they become lighter. And now, question B. B and C, right? Seldom they ask, because what happens here are very normal things that happen in plants. Most of the time we know already and nothing much to talk about. That's why they don't really ask. But let's say if they do, same, just start with the mass. Mass, you can see increase very significantly. Number one is because they got leaves already. Leaves form, photosynthesis occur. Growth rate, of course, increase. So you can say leaves form. Stage C is just like Earth. Once you reach maturity, adult, you stop growing. So same here. The mass constant because already reached maturity. So growth rate 0. And then D is where they die. So mass decrease at the end. Of course, now you don't say what food storage is used. Of course, no more already. They already, you can germinate once. So what happens here? Now you don't say, oh, because they're dying. Okay, that's not the reason. So first, mass decrease first. Same thing. Why? Now, when they're about to die, the most common thing that will happen is, right, their leaves start to dry, their flowers start to dry. So basically, leaves and flower will shed. When paddy, right, when it's about time to harvest it, right, from green color, they change to yellow color. Last time when you play the hay day, When it comes to harvest, then it become yellow color already. So same no, because the leaves basically start to dry up. That's why they become lighter as the leaves start to fall. So the easiest thing you can say is leaves and flower sheds. Number three, this one, I need you to remember it more than the second one because it's very important. Now, since this plant, their lifespan is very short, right? Right before they die, they must make sure they reproduce. So what happened here is they disperse their seed. So for paddy, for example, the rice will fall. Rice is basically their seed. Okay, so seed dispersal of seed occurs. Okay, done. That is primary plant. That is annual plant. Now, done already. We look at secondary. Secondary, right? I realize is the least asked among the three. Like, they don't care about this. It's not important one. It's like, you know, like at home, you're the middle child like that. Whoever here middle child usually less attention one. Right? They pay more attention to the elderly one, the elder one, and the youngest one. So same thing, no. They like to ask the middle one. Because okay, jokes aside, because mainly what happens here, nothing special. Like basically what we mentioned in annual, right, actually do occur here. Like the same thing. They seed germinate and they use the food storage, and then in the end they disperse their seed, the leaf shed. Okay. But other than that, okay, example, you need to know what kind of plants. Now, usually biennial plants are plants very small, very short, right on the surface. They grow right on the surface of the soil one. So basically carrots and cabbage are the two most common example. For biennial plants, right, usually they just ask what happened during the first and second growth year. For the first growth year, mainly they just grow like a normal plant. Okay. And towards the end, you can see the graph slightly go down a bit because towards the end is basically winter. Like we said just now, winter plant becomes dormant. So the leaves will slightly shed a bit and then there's no growth. And then the next year, they continue growth. So what you got to say here is basically during the first growth year, like I say, very normal things occur. So you can say photosynthesis occur. And mainly you also can say food is stored. And basically, plant becomes dormant. Towards the end. Then during the second growth season, second year, they know they're going to die in the end. So second year, right, they will focus on reproducing. So they'll focus on forming flowers, fruit, and seed. It's three lah, mainly before they die. Okay, so what we can say is food stored is used to produce, depending on the plant, either from fruit, some of flowers, and of course seeds. So that is mainly what they will ask lah. Honestly, there's nothing much. So this one, very rarely they ask. For perennial, they will ask, but not as common as annual. I find annual actually more common, okay, but this one also you still need to know. So basically for perennial plants, how do you describe the growth curve is we will say there's a series of sigmoid, or you will say there's annual series of sigmoid, means the sigmoid repeats every single year. But if this series is good enough already. So basically every sigmoid represents one growth year. All right, here represents one growth year. So you can see that every sigma, right, the pattern is the same. It goes up at the beginning and go down at the end. That's basically because at the beginning is basically like just now we mentioned the annual growth rings. So usually growth happens at the beginning of the year during spring and summer. Summer, of course, lesser, but there's still growth. So towards the end, which is mainly winter, there's no growth, become dormant. That's why it goes down. So if they ever ask you to explain the sigmoid that happens every year, why is there increase and decrease of growth every year? You talk about the season and then talk about the growth. Okay, this one later we do questions, then we write together. So that's basically perennial. It's that simple. And remember, perennial, since they have long lifespan, they are the only plant that can undergo secondary growth, which means they are the only plant that can form wood. All right. So if they ask you example of perennial, right? Now, if you want to keep it simple, you think about fruit trees in Malaysia, they have wood. Your tropical fruits, basically, durian, mango, papaya. These are the easier one to remember. But of course, you also can say the woody, the trees that we use to make wood in those tropical rainforests. Just now we mentioned what chengal, meranti, oak, all these also can. Okay. Then let's do questions. We do more. Yeah, not much time. Also, half an hour. Okay, so these questions I'm about to do, right, is not inside these notes one, also extra question one, which I post in the chat just now. If whoever got come my physical class one, I actually got give you this copy. Yeah, so we do that one. Okay, because this one got more state paper, like which you expect to come out in your upcoming exams one. Okay, we start off with this one first. Page 34. Question 14. Name the type of plants that have the growth curve in 4.1 and 4.2. So they ask you to name type, right? So based on the growth curve, one sigmoid, many sigmoid. So it's just annual, biennial, perennial plants. They are easy, yeah. So if they ask example, are there only you say corn, rice, all those? If you just type annual, perennial, will do. What causes the growth curve X to repeat every year? Yeah, so this is the one that I was mentioning earlier. So why does it repeat the same way every year? Because every year you have the same season. So here we will say number one. Okay, 2 marks each. So basically number one, during spring and summer. Oops. What will happen is there's more growth. All right, so you can say condition is more suitable. Therefore, more growth occurs, growth rates occurs. Then during winter, you can say, what happened to your plant? The leaves drop already, you got no leaf, they become dormant. So you can say condition is less suitable. And obviously plant becomes dormant, you can say. Therefore, no growth or lesser growth occur also can. So that is why it goes up beginning of the year and go down towards the end. And if you look at the next two, right, we actually already mentioned this earlier just now, because they are both asking regarding the annual growth curve, the R and S, right? So explain the growth curve in stage R. So same thing, lor. If you ask growth, right, you talk about the mass first. Remember, please always start with the mass. Mass decrease. Why? Because the seed law germinate law. Easy, same 2 marks. So dry mass decrease. So we write the same thing again because food storage int cotillion of seed is used for germination. Then explain why. There is a decrease in mass towards the end of the growth in diagram 4.1. So why is there a decrease in mass? So because at the end, you're going to die. But of course, don't say they die, right? Because they're going to reproduce, right? They throw their seed, or you want to say the leaf and flowers shed. So just now we already say lah. So 1 mark, you can just pick whichever you want. So dispersal of seed occur. So these two, the same exact question. Okay, now the next one, not so much the same already. Two difference between the growth curve in 4.1 and 4.2. Okay, two difference they want. Now, the first difference we really can see. Okay, come on, everybody. Why don't you try and tell me? These two growth curves got what difference? So what forms the growth curve, right? Can you tell me the first one? Is the number of what? Your hint already is really the number. Number of what is different in these two plants? In these two growth curve. Come on. You sure can tell one, can see one. So see this and this. What's that? How is this two different? Perennial plant, only plant that undergo secondary growth. Okay, that doesn't really tell much about the growth curve, right? Yeah, you're right. But then they want you to talk about the curve more. So, like we mentioned earlier, these three plants all have sigmoid. But how are their sigmoid different? The number of sigmoid. Look, one sigmoid, series of sigmoid. Understand? So, sure, we can see from the diagram already one ma. So 4.1 consists of one sigmoid curve, while 4.2 consists of n series of sigmoid curve. And number two, we already also mentioned, every sigmoid represents one growth year. So you can also talk about the lifespan, because the lifespan, the curve represents how long they live ma. So you can say 4.1 completes its life cycle within 1 year. What's 4.1? So sorry. 4.2 grow for many years. Okay, don't say complete its life cycle. Now this for more than 2 years. You say it will grow for more than 2 years. It takes more than 2 years to grow. Right? So 4.2 year grows for more than 2 years. This one, okay, I don't do really lah. This one, the same thing we did earlier. The one importance for growth A and B. So it's actually growth A and B is actually the growth in the first year. So that's of course primary growth, and the growth that happens subsequently, secondary growth. So they basically asking you secondary growth and primary and secondary growth importance, which we did earlier. Increase length, increase height. Then Let's do one reason trial question. So this is page 41, question 18. Now, annual growth curve question. Okay, which the questions here mainly also mostly be done already one. So name a type of plant that have the growth curve. So type annual, biennial, perennial. So of course we know already annual plant. Two examples of the plant. So we already say small plants, they usually are shaped like this one. So it's your corn, paddy. Process that occurs in the plant during stage P. Now they only want 1 mark. So the process that occur here, what are they doing here that causes the mass to decrease? Obviously, termination. So don't need to explain. Just one process, 1 mark, right? Keep it simple. State the process that occurs in the plant during stage P. So, hey, I'm so sorry. This is a mistake. Yeah, just to look at these two. Now, which type of plants can adapt to extreme surroundings? So if your surrounding is extreme, they're very, very windy, suddenly very hot. So out of the three, annual, biennial, perennial. Come on. Which one do you think survive better? This one actually we got do before in class one, the exact same thing. So yes, obviously the answer is perennial. Why? Now, because only perennial plant, remember, can secondary growth. And secondary growth forms more tissues in the plant. So these extra tissues they form during secondary growth, right, is the one that benefits them, which is what? The bark. Okay, very good. So for example, if it gets too hot, this bark can protect them. Other than that, the wood also. So let's say they grow at places that have strong wind, always got heavy storm, hurricane, typhoon. The wood can support them back well. Okay, so there's a few things you can say lah. So you can say your answer you can say because they have strong and hard stem, woody stem. They provide mechanical support. They also have bark. Okay, then you can say, how does bug protect them from extreme surroundings? So you talk about the weather more than the insect biting them. So we can say when it's too hot, you prevent water loss. So which is waterproof to reduce water loss. Yeah, easy, right? This one. Okay. Now, 42, this one, I don't want to do this one already because this one, if you head to my Instagram or the Xiao so got this one, I already explained this one already one. So you go there and watch the video, very 5 minutes only one. Okay, so this one got talk about the annual growth curve again, and also got the annual growth rate, which is not we did exactly the same thing one. Okay, easy. So we do another trial. Now this trial here very simple. Johor last year one. They give you 2 stems, one primary, one secondary one. Type of growth, just mentioned, right? Primary, secondary, easy. Type of tissues. What type of tissues plays an important role in the growth of plants? 2 marks, right? So remember, right? Primary, secondary, each involved different kind of tissues. What already? Just now, growth is these two. You meristematic, so these two, apical, lateral. Apical is for primary, lateral is for secondary. That is what they want. So if they ask type of tissues involved in growth, is the meristem. Since there are 2 growth here, so it's apical, meristem, and lateral meristem. two difference between growth T and U. Same thing, not primary growth, secondary growth. So one of the difference we already mentioned here, you want to say this also can. If it involve the apical meristem mitosis, involve the lateral meristem mitosis. So it's same as just now already. I just write the keyword can lah. One involved in increasing the height, length. One increases the diameter. Very easy only. Okay. Now, final, slightly more than 10 minutes. Okay, we'll do two. Still got one more here. Sorry. This one. Okay. How the age of the plants can be determined based on its aneurysm. Now, if it's just 2 marks, right? Not really explain a lot like just now like that. So first, you can say, the annual growth rings, right? So how do I count the annual growth rings? So we already mentioned there are basically two, one big and one small. Every one represents 1 year. Okay, but let's say if they ask you to count the year, right? You don't have to count 2 by 2. You can just pick one and count the same lah. Of course, they pick the bigger one and count like this is 1 year, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example. So they already tell you annual growth rings. So how do I use it to count? So I told you just now, every large or bigger and smaller ring represents 1 growth year. But let's say it's just a 2-mark question, right? You don't have to go and explain what happens at every season. Means you only need 1 more mark to explain, So just straight away say each season what kind of ring is for. For instance, during spring, yes, I know there is better weather, there's more secondary growth, but since it's just 1 mark, you just say larger or bigger actually, bigger and brighter xylem tissues. While during summer is the opposite, smaller and darker. Okay, so sometimes you just have to plan your answer based on the question. It's just 2 marks, you do have to write that many. Let's say they ask you 4 marks, then of course you will explain more. Then, okay, we just do 2 more. These 2 slightly more challenging. The one that we just done are very simple. You can see the same people that here, they come out here, actually all we mentioned, most of it we mentioned earlier. Okay, there's this one here. It's a recent SPM question, 2022. Is question 15. Okay, the front part is quite simple, so I don't want to do already. We straight away do this one. C. They say there are these kind of bushes, right? They got different kind of pattern. I mean, in this kind of botanical recreational park. So the main question here is they say importance of trimming them to form this topiary tree. Topiary tree are this kind of pattern kind of bushes lah. Right. Number 1, what do they do here mainly, right? Is by cutting the tip of the plant. So by cutting the tip, you remove the apical meristem. So by removing the apical meristem, they can't grow vertically. So by cutting the tip, right, you will stimulate them to grow laterally. So why they want to do that is number 1, control the height. If they grow laterally, then there's more room for trimming different kind of pattern. Right? If you grow like that, you can cut like a swan, you can cut like an elephant shape. Also can. Yeah. So number 1, what they do here is the apical meristem is cut off to maintain or to control the height. So then you can say this stimulates, okay, the sideways punya stem, right, are called lateral buds. Growth of lateral buds. So if they grow lateral means side. If they grow buds means like the branches like that. If you grow sideways, then you can trim it into different kind of pattern, which makes it, more pretty lor. Growth of lateral buds, which allow trimming to you can say improve appearance of the plant. So one of the main importance is basically make it pretty lor. And people will come here and post story, more Instagrammable lor. That's the whole point of it lah, basically. All right. Now, one last final question. Then you can go and sleep and enjoy the remaining of your weekend. Okay. Remember earlier today, we said that the ground tissue, the parent colon scleron, okay, we'll do that one lah. So in the same notes, this question. Now, this, if you forget what was this already, just now we mentioned permanent tissue, ground, like I say, is the most common one they will ask. Because, yeah, this one more pattern a bit lah. Parent, colon, scleron, Purgi, college, summer. Now, these three tissues, they are involved in support. And I remember it in this order is because from P to S, P, C, S, soft, medium, hard. F1 punya tires like that. Okay, so they support different part of the plant. Which, from here, how do you gonna know which is which? So for P to S, right? Okay, there are two ways you can recognize them. Number one, I look at the size. So P will look bigger, medium, small. But size is not the main thing. The cell wall also you can look at. So since P is soft, right, their cell wall is thin, medium, thick. So if you look at here, look at R. Okay, let's try to look at R first. Based on, compared to Q and P, right? Which one do you think it is? We're going to end already. Come, everybody, let's try this together. Which one do you think it is? Does it look like parent, big, thin, or the others? Come, Wei-Xiang, let's try. Memphis, Ziying, come. What do you think? So parent, I say soft ma, size very big. This one normal, this one small. And the cell wall thick, medium, thin, medium, thick. So yes, exactly. This one is the biggest of all. See, big, medium, small. So this is actually P. This is C. This is S. And if you look at the cell wall, thin, medium. This one very thick. That's how you determine it. Look at the cell wall, look at the size. So name the type of permanent tissues shown. So type already say lah, this is ground tissue. Don't need to write a specific one for each. All these are ground. One function of tissue, R. So R is the softest. So which is the softest part of the plant? It's basically the leaf. So this one you can say it provides shape in leaves. Now, two structural difference between P and Q, right? Our scleron and the colon. So the one you compare the hardest one and the medium one. Now, don't write about the size of the cell. That one is not a difference. Now, you can mention the cell wall. So P basically has thinner cell walls. This one has thicker cell walls. Now, besides the size, right, the cell walls are made up of different structure. Okay, yes, Suzanne, very good. Exactly. Why the cell walls of shit, I made mistake. This is thick. Sorry, only this is thick. This is thick. Sorry, P baru only thick. P is thick. This is thin. So this one is the hardest. Why? Because right, it is made up of lignin, wood. That's why this is hard. This one is made of regular punya fiber cellulose. So I will write Q first. So you can say the cell wall is thickened by cellulose. And another fiber called pectin. Basically is vegetable and fruit punya fiber. We can use our teeth and bite fruit and vegetables, so they're not very hard. But for P, you definitely cannot bite because it's wood. Why is it so hard? Because it's made of wood fiber, lor. So cell wall is thickened by lignin. So that is the second difference. Their cell wall are made up of different things. Okay. For P is just for R, right? This one, this one is just cellulose only. That's why they're very soft. All right. So that's it. Finished already. So answers I already put in the chat just now. There you can just go and download yourself. And then if you have any questions, you can stay back and ask me. If not, then that's it lah. For my students, I see you next week. For the rest, hope to see you soon also. So if anything also, you can WhatsApp me lah. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon lah. Bye bye. Enjoy your remaining weekend. Good night. Bye bye guys.